Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hello friends, welcome to my recap and review of Outlander Season 7, Episode 7, A Practical Guide for Time Travelers. Holy crap, there was so much happening in this episode. It was just like kind of chill and then everything spiking at the end, and I was just sitting kind of stunned at the end last night. Not necessarily for like everything that happened in this episode, but just kind of like the greater implications of it all and like where we're leading to. Like when we think of this, this is something I should have looked up ahead of time, so feel free to correct me, but I know we'll have another 8 episodes in this season. We have the mid-season finale next week, which I hope is a extra long episode. Maybe it's not. I should look, but they haven't really had super long first and last episodes like they did for a while. But we have 8 episodes left of Season 7, and then we have, I believe it's supposed to be like 10 episodes for Season 8. I will look that up and put it right here so no one has to like correct me. I'm making a note to put that in there, episodes left. But when we think of that, we start to think, we have less than like 20 episodes of this left, which is still a lot of TV. Like Outlander has done a lot with what it has, it being the type of show that it is. Hold on. But I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. Of course, there's going to be things we like pick and choose overall. But when I look at the fabric of this show and the level of detail overall that they took, and even, we have to admit, even in seasons as book lovers that we don't love as much, where there's things where we're like, what the hell were you doing with this character or this choice that you made? Overall, for me, it was the show that made me first fall in love with this world. I stand by that. Though I now would like live and breathe these books, it's the show that made me fall. And I'm so impressed with what they've done. And though I wish this could go on forever, I do understand the need to like, well, Diana's books she's not done yet. We don't want to just like push it on forever. There are a few places in the series you can naturally like end a few things. That isn't something I'll speculate within this video. I maybe actually will make a video once the season's over about speculations, because I've really had my brain twisting and turning. And though I will talk a little bit those at the very end in kind of a spoiler section, I don't just want to start spewing out my thoughts right now and ruin it for people who really don't know, because I know some of you just follow along as it goes. You read the books, only one ahead at a time, whatever your personal like plan is for it. I'm not here to mess it up. But anyway, I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit in this intro of just how impressed that I am. I get this like anxiousness before I watch each episode. Not because I'm worried like what they'll do with it, because I'm always sad that I'm like 1 episode less to go. I don't know. I'm someone that I actually rarely finish series, TV series. There's very few that I actually have because I don't like things to end. The Outlander world, because I know there's more that goes on with it, I probably won't have as much hurt doing that. But anyway, we got to get into it because we got a lot to talk about. As always, I have my notes here. I've been taking them on my computer the last couple times, which is also nice because I can fold it up and like hold it in front of me here, but also because my handwriting just can't keep up with some of the notes I've been taking. So this episode, as I said, is a practical guide for time travelers, and as we have done for this season and previous ones, I'm going to go over kind of a recap with a little bit of my commentary poked in there. Then I will give the episode a rating for my enjoyment level, a rating for book accuracy, and then I will go into that book accuracy portion and discuss like how well I think they did. I've been the last couple weeks to be more accurate. I then go through my copy of the book and mark down the chapters that scenes from the show were in to discuss their accuracy. So that's what we've been doing, and honestly, it takes me a little more time, but I feel more confident about what I'm sharing with you guys, and there's less worry that I'm just speaking out of my backside about what's going on, because as it is, like I've said, it's been 4 years since I've reread the series as a whole, although I'm getting so tempted to do it. Like y'all who only watch the Outlander stuff, like my schedule is so full, and if I had it my way, I would fuck off all my responsibilities and start a reread of the series right now, because even just poking into the book to take the notes, I just want to binge the whole book, because I love what Diana's done. Okay, I've wasted 5.5 minutes already. Let me take a sip and let's dive in. Oopsie, I made it turn off. All right, so we start this off finding out that we are with the Continental Army in Bemis Heights, New York. Bemis, sorry if I said that. And that is September 1777. And this begins with a bit of a voiceover with Bree, or with a letter to Bree. And we're saying that Jamie has taken up a new commission. So there's a little bit going back and forth with this. I was confused because, you know, I'm used to commission of things being like a couple of years, right? And that wasn't what was happening in the Continental Army, because they knew that they couldn't necessarily ask people to stay and not be on their farms and be working for long amounts of time. So commissions were generally like for a few months at a time. So that's part of the reason too, like when Jamie gets, you know, coerced into this commission in the beginning, well, it's only supposed to delay their trip to Scotland for a couple of months when they take it up. But after the previous episode, when we had that interaction with Daniel Morgan, ooh yeah, I pulled that out of my head, with Daniel Morgan, you know, when he saw how well Jamie was hunting, he asked him to join his snipers, aka the riflemen, you know, brigade or, you know, group, whatever it is. And so Jamie gets a new uniform that really just looks like Trapper Dan, and I appreciate it. Okay, I appreciate it. I like the look. But that is where he's going to be in, you know, we had that discussion of her being like, well, I like that it puts you a little further away from the action, because, you know, as a sniper, you can shoot from further away. Still very nervous for him to be going into battle. So that is in a voiceover. But then we very quickly go back to the present, because we left with this crazy cliffhanger. So I don't know what was happening last week. Like, I know I'm such a bad girl when it comes to this. I knew that Buck had to be showing up. Okay, I knew we were going to see Buck, obviously. But it had just, like, when I was watching it, it had threw me, because he didn't look like anyone I'd seen before. And you know, I say, like, I don't do too much deep diving into what's come out in articles or what's said ahead of time, because I've learned in previous seasons to not psych myself up. Like, I really used to be someone who every trailer version that came out, I was commenting on it. Every time there was an interview from one of the showrunners or one of the actors, I would just soak it all up. And I've really found, just for my own, I mean, at the time it was like my own mental health when I was watching seasons like 4 and 5 and getting so frustrated with what people were saying and their explanations for stuff, that I stopped doing that. So it does put me at a bit of a disadvantage now when I'm doing like recaps for you guys, because I have to like catch up after the fact. But it preserves my own watching experience, which at the end of the day, I'm sorry guys, that's more important to me than what I'm able to give you guys. Do you know what I mean? But my point being, when I saw, you know, who our Nucklavee was, it wasn't clicking in my head that this was William Buckley Mackenzie, even though I like knew that's who we were supposed to run into. I know that's what happened. But it's also because this is a new actor, right? So if you don't know, if you're like me and don't pay attention, plenty of you guys probably already know this. But when we were first introduced to William Buckley Mackenzie, it was in season 5, and it was when Roger, you know, when Roger got hanged for flirting with Morag Mackenzie. So he had met Morag before when she was on a ship in season 4, when he was, you know, trying to get to Bree, and he got stuck on Stephen Bonnet's ship, and he actually saved this woman and her child from, you know, being like killed by that scenario. But Buck had never really like seen him, because it was really dark on the ship and he like didn't know him. And I don't think they really showed Buck in that that episode either. But when we see her again, we then see who her husband is, and Roger is related to her and Buck. And so that is why he was so in awe of Morag and was paying attention to her. But Buck immediately took that as this man was trying to move in on his wife, and then used a scenario of accusing him of something to get him hanged. But now we're in this situation where Buck has found himself in 1980. And when he shows up there, they did do a very good job of making this Buck look like Buck. But, my point, this was, when they had William Buckley Mackenzie show up, they had Graham McTavish come back as a fun cameo, because William Buckley Mackenzie is the bastard son of Galis Duncan and Dougal Mackenzie. Now, William Buckley doesn't know that because, Dougal didn't acknowledge the child because he was married and had daughters, and Galis was supposed to be burned at the stake as a witch. So that stuff was supposed to happen. So William Buckley Mackenzie, we're just going to say Buck. Buck doesn't actually know who his parents are either. That's not really something that gets brought up in this episode yet, but sorry. We took a sidetrack from the recap because I had to get into some of this. But for me, like I said, when I saw who it was, it didn't click immediately because, Graham McTavish played him last time. Now, the showrunners explained, that was just a fun cameo at the time, to have Graham McTavish, playing the son of his character. It was a cool cameo to have him be there since he looks so much different. But now we have someone else playing him because he's going to be a, semi-regular character for a little while here. So we have someone new. So again, that was just my fault of it wasn't clicking in place. But this is that same man. And okay, now let's get back to the recap part of it. So him and his family were getting starved out of Scotland, which was very true. And there ended up being that he was around Craignadoon, and he ended up falling through the stones, which was very, very sad. And when he woke up, he didn't know what had happened, and he ended up making his way to the town and seeing that it looked completely different. It was modern. And then he ended up seeing Roger come out of a shop or the church or something like that, and followed him home to Lallybroch and ended up starting to spy. So he has been the one who the kids have seen, and all that good stuff. So I don't want to skip ahead now. So that's what we know so far of him. That's how we got there. They're chatting with him. Now we go back to the past. And we see Willie with the British Army. There are the Hessians, and there is Colonel Fraser on this side, who, this is a fun thing. If you ever watched Turn, Washington's Spies, the same actor who played, I think it's Robert Rogers. Don't quote me, but if you've seen Turn, you know who I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure that's Robert Rogers. He's now playing this Colonel Fraser, which is fantastic. Just absolutely love it. And so he's going to be someone that Willie is working with. So there's a meeting of the leaders here. They're trying to decide where to fight next and what's going to happen. So Willie and his friend Hammond, they're out kind of messing around, playing with their fancy swords and all this stuff. And then Willie gets told that he is going to need to take a message to another general somewhere, and they need to send out 2 messages, and so he's supposed to get sent to do that. But William ends up because they want to ask someone for a distraction so that they're able to attack and have the Continental Army have to split their attention. Okay. Then we go back to Bree and Roger. See, there's so much bouncing around. This is why I take very good notes. So then we go back to Bree and Roger, and they're feeding Buck, and they're talking with him. And so Roger explains to him how they're related, and that's why he was around Morag. He wasn't flirting with her. He was like, I'm your 5 times great-grandson, with probably a few Jeremiahs mixed in. And he's saying, my son, Jem, is literally named after your son, Jem. That's where I got the name from, because it's my middle name and it's my son's name. So he kind of is blowing his mind, which is kind of cute. And so then he realizes how he almost killed his great-grandson, which again, how could he have known? But also he really jumped on top of assuming he was going after his wife very quickly. But I think he kissed her as well. or she kissed him. There was kissing involved. Let's not forget that. There was a kiss involved somewhere, if I remember correctly. So it's not as if Buck was completely off base, because it was strange for there to be a kiss between them if they're related somehow. And when asked, he says he left in 1778. So we'll get back to that. But that will be like, there's so many different times that are going to end up involved in this show by the end. It's kind of nuts. But he left in 1778. So while they have Buck there, Rob Cameron ends up showing up for dinner. So he'd been invited to come for dinner sometime, but he didn't let them know when. He just shows up. It's definitely a little creepy. So they hide Buck in the priest's hole and just tell him like, hey, chill out in here while we have this guy out for dinner. And so then Roger makes a monumentally stupid decision, by the way. I don't know if anyone's picking this up. I mean, you probably were, because they make a point of like showing it. But he takes him in and he's showing him this like the book of songs that he mentioned, and he leaves him alone in the room with the box of letters that is unlocked and it's on the table. And this just gets shown there. Like, I'm really proud of their like show don't tell stuff of this, because the box is just left there, and we'll come back to what looks different in the room after this. But we just see Rob alone in the room with this, and I literally was like, he leaves him alone with the box of, you know, very important time traveling information. What the fuck? So now the kids get home, and Rob is being a little bit flirty at the meal, and Roger, he's not like really honing in on it or being strange about it, but he is also eyeing him up just a little bit as well. So there's that. All right, then we go back to the Continental Army, and this was the cute little scene that there had been a clip of this that got put on Instagram. So Jamie had found a book for Claire, and he brings it to her, and it's hard for her to read, and so he teases her that she needs spectacles, which is really cute. I love that. And then he's about to go to a battle, and so she says, make sure you come home to me, because if you don't, I'll come looking for you. So then we have a good slow-mo of him heading out to battle here. So then we go back to the British Army, and General Fraser is having a chat with the boys who are being a little bit silly, making some jokes, and General Fraser, Colonel Fraser, whatever he is, you guys know what I mean. I'm not going to call the right title all the time. I'm not a military woman, okay? I'm just not. And he says it's good to keep your spirits up because you need to have good morale going. William asked to stay and fight because he's better suited not being a courier. And General Fraser's like, all right, well, I'll talk to him and we'll get you to stay. Now, this, unfortunately, is going to put William and Jamie literally on opposite sides of a musket in this battle here, which is crazy. So then we go back to the 1980, and Rob just won't leave. He keeps wanting to drink. He keeps wanting to talk. He's this lonely, divorced dude. He invites Jem to come to the movies with him and his nephew Bobby to the next day. And I'm literally like, don't do it. Don't do it. But he just seems so friendly. He seems so friendly and nice, right? Okay, so then they don't know where Buck is. He's not in the priest hole room anymore. So he's watching telly with the kiddos. And it's so cute because Mandy is brushing his beard. He just looks so in awe of her too. It's so cute. And he's like apologized to the kids for scaring them. And he's watching TV with them, and it's kind of adorable. So they agree to kind of like take turns having him go with them for the day until they're able to help him get home. Hopefully at the next feast day, or the next powerful day at the Stones, they will help him go home, hopefully. So then the next day, Bree brings him to work with her. They've cleaned him up a little bit, put him into some of Roger's clothes. And Bree starts asking more details about why he didn't go back right away. And he says something about like, well, first he wasn't sure how he got through. And then he was very scared. And she mentions his ring, because he has a ring that's missing a gemstone. So she's like, that's probably how you were supposed to come. What were you thinking of when you were able, when you came through? Because she's like, we'll help you get back. We'll get you a gemstone. And if you think of your family, you should be able to go back to the right. So, Then we show Roger at home, and he is sitting in his office, and this time, like, they don't do too much about this, but they show the box, and there is a letter, just the tiny corner of a letter sticking out of the box. They barely even focus on it, but we see that's not what it looked like the last time we were in this room. And that's all that really gets said about it, because yeah, Roger like sits down to it. But like that's all we see. So like I put, there is a page sticking out of the box. So he's getting ready to go, I think, teach his class or whatever. He's wearing his kilt again. And then he's looking for Buck, and he finds Buck is back at the trailer. And he's kind of like playing with Jem's airplane and being like, this is amazing. So him and Roger do a little bit of bonding about that. And then Buck warns Roger about Rob coming on to his wife. Now, it's fair enough for like Roger to not be nervous, because he doesn't have a reason to be nervous, but Buck is telling him, he's like, he's touching her and making eyes at her, and you should keep an eye on him. Not so much be worried about Bree, but like keep an eye on this dude. And Roger just kind of shrugs it off or whatever. All right, then we talk about some interesting stuff about Buck here. So he shares again, like Roger asks if he would like to know the year that he died, because he did find a family tree, and it says that he died in 1778, which is the year he says he came through. But Roger explains, we don't really know what this means. It could be that you never go back, so they think you died. Or it could say that because currently you're here with us. If we get you back, those dates could change. And we have slight evidence that it is possible to do those things. So he's like, I found it. Currently it says you died then. But we don't really know whether that's actually true or not, because you might still get back, and then the date here will look different to us in the future. So helpful, not really helpful, what happens. Then we have Bree and Roger having some sexy time, which we haven't had much sexy time anymore. They definitely, you know, have moved away from that and made it a little more boring, which I understand. And this does happen in like a lot of shows too. I feel like shows feel like they need to be sexier in the beginning to get people's attention. And now they don't. But I will say, it was a pretty hot Bree and Roger scene. It's always a little difficult for me to watch like Bree and Roger, even though in the books, like I love them. I'll talk about it more in the what's it like in the book section, because this like sex scene in the book is more like referenced. It's not like shown, but Roger is reflecting on the sex scene that they had, or their intimacy that they've had. And they have such a complex sex life, just because, I mean, that is people's lives. When you are with someone for a very long time, it's not as boring as people might say. And you have layers and emotions and things in it, you know? And there's just so much between them. And I love how Diana writes about how things grow and change. But anyway, there's pretty hot scene between the two of them. Like, it was pretty good. So they have some sexy time together, and it's really beautiful. All right, so then we go to the past again, and we see Ian with some of the natives. Now, he's done up for war. He has paint on his face, his hair slicked back, and there is someone running through the woods who is taking off their coat. So is this, I believe this is supposed to be one of the messengers. Now, correct me if I'm wrong with this, because I did rewind to slow down, mostly because this man looked so much like Jamie Bell. Okay, now if you don't know, Jamie Bell is also from Turn, Washington Spies. I literally watched the credits, and then I also looked it up to see if Jamie Bell was in here, because with having the guy who plays Robert Rogers in here, I literally, the way the camera was and the way he looked like under his hair, it looked like Jamie Bell. So I went and looked it up. It wasn't him from what I see, but I believe it's one of the men who's supposed to be a messenger. And so he looks like he's lost his horse. He's taken off his coat. Now that is, you are considered a spy if you're not sharing your colors when someone comes across you. And Ian shoots at him and then is like, where do you think you're going? We don't see a conclusion of that that's left open-ended, but it is a scene that happens, so I wanted to mention it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so then it says we have the first Battle of Saratoga, September 17th, 1777. And everybody's lining up for this, and we see Hammond get shot in the head. I have to say, I knew it was coming, like, not even from, like, a book sense. I just mean this dude was getting too much attention and being a friend of William's, and I was like, what's going to be a way to harden William very quickly? And he who thought he was so ready for battle, but to have his friend get shot right in front of him, and that's what happens. So everybody's kind of freezing to start, and then it's just all-out war. And they're screaming and death, and we know that Jamie's on the other side of Willie in this as well, which is pretty scary. Okay, then we go back to 1980, and Roger's waking up. He is, you know, kind of awakened, and he goes down to his office and is looking around, and then he hears Mandy scream, and she's screaming for Jem. And so they end up going into her room, and she's saying, he's not here with me, and they're like, he's just staying at his friend's house, trying to calm her down. And she says, the rocks, they screamed at me, and Jem went near the stones, and the bad man took him. And so they're like, okay, well, we're gonna go check, we're gonna get him home. So they call Robbie's mom, and there was no movie. Robbie's car is not at his house, and they're gone. And so this is when then Roger points out that he had noticed some things moved in his office. He says that Rob has read his book. He pretended it was a sci-fi thing, but he might know it. So Roger and Buck get in the car, and they head to the stones, and he's like, does he know? And he's like, I have no idea. I don't know anything about him. I don't know what he knows. And so they make it to the stones, and they find Jem's scarf with the little tufty pin on it. And so they believe that he may have went through the stones, unfortunately. And that's where we end the 1980 storyline for the time. Then we go to the battle aftermath, to digging graves, to William joining in on digging the graves so they can give these men a proper burial. Then there's celebrating with champagne, and there's a bit of a commiseration with William and General Fraser, saying how, you know, they believe that this is a victory because they don't necessarily see the costs up close like we do. And then we pan across the battlefield, and we see that Jamie has been injured and is lying on the ground. And that is where we cut the episode. So, lots of stuff that happened in this episode. So, let us discuss what the rating was for me this episode. So, in terms of enjoyment, I actually would give this one an 8 or even an 8.5. I am loving particularly the Bree and Roger storyline. I really, really like it. It's a favorite of mine in the books, which is funny because the first time I read the series, I think I've shared this, the first time I read the series, I was so like bored with what was happening with Bree and Roger, because it is pretty spread out through the book, and we're going to discuss that in a minute when I get to that part. But I was so kind of like bored with it. And it isn't until later on in the series when I realized the full significance of what's going on in the future timeline that I was like, what? And so when I did a reread, I really paid attention to these parts. And I think they're doing such a good job. And one of the things too is because these chapters that focus on Bree and Roger in the book are pretty spread out, they're able to show basically all of the content that happens there. So it just feels so truthful and so like right to, you know, mirroring what happens, because they're able to show all of it. So it doesn't feel like they're leaving anything out or jumping around. You know, whereas with some of the stuff in the Revolutionary one, like they're kind of missing stuff and smushing things around. So enjoyment level though, I am going to give this one an 8. For book accuracy, again, half of it is extremely accurate. Half of it is pretty much spot on to what's happening in the 1980 storyline. But as we're going to talk about, they're really kind of smushing and fudging stuff around in that. So I'm torn, but I'm going to stay at a 7 with this because I'm loving the Bree and Roger stuff so much. And for me, that is kind of more important that they stick to that. But there is, as we're going to talk about, quite a lot that's been kind of left out, and I don't know what they're doing with it with the other stuff. So, all right, now we're going to get into what's happening in the book. And again, because I want to get into some spoiler stuff with this one, first I'm going to start with just which chapters are covered, which isn't a ton of them. And then I'll put up a little like spoiler tag, and so if you don't want to know or discuss stuff in the future, you can end the episode when I get to there. But for now, let's talk about it. So the chapters of the book that were covered with this one were chapter 61, which is No Better Companion Than a Rifle. And this chapter starts in September 15th, 1777. And really the only stuff that they put in the show does have to do with the book that gets given to Claire, which is just a tiny little part of that one. And then there's some stuff with, you know, Daniel Morgan and Jamie and him agreeing to like go off for the fight. And then there is chapter 62, which is One Just Man. And this is September 19th, 1777. So if you had heard when the first Battle of Saratoga takes place, which is September 17th, 1777, compared to the show, like that's when the show says the battle is, okay? In the book, it goes from September 15th and then jumps to September 19th, which is crazy. So I looked up when the Battle of Saratoga actually was, okay? And when I looked this up, the Battle of Saratoga actually lasted for quite a while. And the very beginning of it was September 19th through October 7th, okay? So this battle lasted a long time, all right? And I just don't quite know, like, why the show said the first Battle of Saratoga was the 17th. I don't know what other history stuff they were finding. I don't know why they wouldn't just say 19th. Was this a typo? What was going on? I'm confused. I'm very confused because I was like, did Diana do this wrong? She doesn't usually get the dates wrong because she puts a lot of dates in here. Granted, she doesn't have to get it right because she is writing historical fiction. So she can change what she wants, right? But when I looked it up, no, she was right. It is September 19th is when it begins. So I don't know what was going on with this, okay? Okay. Anyway, so we cover that. And I can't even fully talk about this chapter because it has Claire showing up to find Jamie on the battlefield. Like we don't see the battle really from, we don't see the battle from Jamie's point of view then. We just see it from Claire. Now, one of the things also that the book shows is that in chapter 61, it also has Ian running into Willie and saying that their debt is even, which the show had happen when Ian helped rescue Claire. But really it happens in a scene here where he says, "A life for a life, Mr. Murray. We're quits. Don't let me see you again next time. I may not have a choice." And it didn't have to do with helping save Claire. So just some weird stuff going on. So anyway, the only chapters from the book that kind of line up with stuff the show had was chapter 61 and 62. But this episode ended midway through 62. Because it has Claire showing up to render aid, not just to Jamie, but to the other Continental Army soldiers who were injured. So we'll have to save that for next episode because I don't want to spoil what's in this. Now, the chapters covered by Bree and Roger, they are quite spread out because, as I said, we're popping into their chapters in between stuff that's happening with Claire and Jamie. And the way it's kind of done in the book, we will kind of enter back in with Bree and Roger when Bree like reads the next letter. So that's why in the book we will have like sometimes, let's see where we'll have like 2, 3, 5 chapters of Bree of Jamie and Claire, and then there'll be a letter that Bree is reading that kind of sums up stuff that we saw, and then we'll have something with them. But the first chapter that lines up with the book in this one, and again, very book accurate to this, is chapter 70, which is called Sanctuary. Let me get to it here. And this chapter has Roger at a little chapel that he's actually putting back together at Lallybroch. So Lallybroch had this tiny little chapel, and he's putting it back together. And William Buckley Mackenzie actually walks in and says, I want you to tell me who we are and who I am and what in the name... Okay, he says, sorry. Minister dear, I want you to tell me who ye are, who I am, and what in the name of Almighty God are we. And that's actually the end of part 5. And then we have part 6, which is Coming Home, which has a lot of stuff happening for Jamie and Claire, which, again, I'll talk about in the spoilers ahead for what I think will happen later on. But then the next chapter we have of Roger and Bree is 72. This one's called The Feast of All Saints. Let me get to this, which starts with the letter. So this starts with Bree reading a letter, and this one is summing up what's happening now in November of 1777. So you can see we went from September to November. So there was a lot that is going on in that time. So I won't tell you what this letter says, but she's reading this letter. And then we basically have the scene from the show where Roger is like, let me introduce you to William Buckley Mackenzie, also known as the Nucklavee. And then we have basically the same scene. They're feeding him, they're talking to him, explaining how things had went, how they went. Bree shares about who her father is and like, you know, how he would have known him. And so this stuff goes back and forth. Buck shares how Morag was pregnant when he went through, so he wants to get back to his family. And in this, he doesn't say the year that he went back, from what I'm seeing. He just says that he went in the summer, and it was near Midsummer's Day that he went through. And also in this one, oh, that's in the next chapter. Won't say that yet. So anyway, and then we have Rob show up, and we have the back and forth with all that. Then the next chapter we have with them isn't until 85. So there's a whole part of Jamie and Claire stuff that's happening that I won't talk about. And now we're in part 7, which is Reap the Whirlwind. And we have chapter 85, which is called Son of a Witch. All right. And this is a pretty, you know, this chapter has like all the rest of the episode we saw in it. So it has Roger and Buck, you know, hanging out around. They see Mrs. Graham. They talk to Fiona. They do some chatting back and forth. We have their remembering on that sex scene. There's this really cool, like, thoughts on Roger. Like, they had sex and it was good. And now he's woken up in the night and he wants to have sex again. But he's reflecting on, like, how hungry for her he was. And he wonders if it's his male instincts wanting to, like, possess her even more because there's another man staying in their house and wanting to, like, possess her and everything. And he reflects a little on how even after all these years, there's still a moment with Bree sometimes where she will, like, recoil back from having sex, testing if she can say no, which is kind of heartbreaking, but it's also this beautiful moment, like, that always comes up between them where she just wants to know that she's free to say no to something after what had happened to her. So that's really powerful. But then we have him going to his office. He wakes up again after they have sex again. He wakes up and he goes down to his office and he notices some things are moved. He doesn't see, like, the wooden snake where it's supposed to be, and things are looking weird. And so he isn't, like, thinking about it too much, but then when he hears Mandy scream, they go and we have the scene with Mandy saying he's not here. And she's pointing to her head. He's not here with me, in her head. And so he says he took him. And she says, it was big walks. They screamed at me. So sad, little Mandy. It's like, it's not me, it's Jem. The man took him and the rocks ate him. And they're like, who do you mean? Do you mean Uncle Buck? And he's like, no, the other man, Bobby's daddy. So she doesn't realize that, like, Bobby's his, like, uncle, whatever. She's a child, it doesn't matter. So then Bree calls and discovers he's gone. So then we have the same, like, rush to the stones, and we have all that. But one of the things that is different is that he gets up to the rocks and then he passes out. And so when he wakes up, Buck had actually dragged him away from the stones because Roger was, like, starting to go through. And Buck was like, I don't think you were, like, ready to do that. And he's like, I wasn't. I didn't mean to. So Roger, we almost lost, like, Roger right then. He almost fell through. And that is where we kind of, like, ended what we had in this episode. So we got through, like, again, this looks like we got through a big chunk, but we actually didn't. We didn't really get through most of this. We only got through 2 chapters that belong to Roger and Bree. There's a whole bunch happening with Claire and Jamie in this section that we haven't even touched. So now I know I'm 40 minutes into this. It's taking a long time. So I'm going to get into that little bit of spoiler piece in just a second. So thank you so much for watching this. If you're my normal viewer on it. Again, I think this season, this first half of this season is doing such an amazing job. And I'm just going to speculate a little bit on the final episode of this half of the season and kind of what I think will be coming in the second half of season 7, which is already filmed. That was something I mentioned on my Instagram last night. I did a post, like, not knowing what was going to get done. So most all of the actors involved in Outlander are like, it was already filmed, like we said. So they'd already filmed it, so we don't have to worry about the writer's strike or any of that. But so Outlander is not a SAG-AFTRA production, so some of the actors may be members of the union, but it's a WGA production instead. So that means that it shouldn't be affected by it. But the writing of season 8 is because there are some writers who are a part of season 8, but they have season 7 completely written, filmed, and ready, but that will be coming later. So yeah, so we'll be getting that no matter what. All right, so what I think will be happening in the finale, obviously we get to see some clips of it. So we see that, you know, she's fine, that Claire is going to find Jamie and we'll need to, like, heal him up and everything. And my suspicion is that we will be headed to Scotland by the end of that. Because the thing that I didn't want to say in the non-spoiler part of it is that this big section here, and in fact, starting with the letter that Bree reads in the beginning of chapter 72, is Claire saying that, you know, Jamie was injured pretty badly. He's getting better, but they are officially on their way to Scotland because he has been you know, discharged from the army at this time for his injury, and so they're going to make their journey to Scotland now. And it also mentioned in this letter that Ian is in love with Rachel, and he needs to decide, like, what he's going to be doing about that. So, you know, it's going to be a soul-searching trip for us to go back to Scotland, and all of this stuff in here is taking place at Lollybrock, but in different times, which is kind of nuts because they make it there. And I won't, again, totally speak to that. So where I see the end of this half season ending is I think we're going to get all of our stuff done for Roger and Buck to go through the stones. I think that, yeah, Claire and Jamie, there'll be a bit of a healing journey going on. There was also a quick clip of Rachel and Ian almost kissing. So I think there will be the discussions about that. You know, Ian's going to be a little worried about if he should try to have a wife after the, you know, after the warning that he gets from the bug man at the beginning of the season, who said, once you have something worth taking, I'll be back. So there's that hanging over his head. But I think that this will end with them either on the ship to Scotland or arriving in it at the end. And I think that we will end where some of this ends for Bree and Roger, is Roger and Buck go through the stones, and then we discover that it's a trick, and that Rob Cameron can't travel or didn't want to try it, but he left that scarf there to make them think they did, leaving Bree and Mandy and Jem unprotected by Roger and lost in time. And it is a crazy fucking cliffhanger, y'all, when that happens in the books. Like, it is nuts. It's absolutely nuts when that happens. But I think that's where they'll end it. And we will get to see, I think that the second half of season 7 will revolve around Scotland. Maybe not the whole thing, because there's also other stuff that happened. Because, like, we go to Scotland and get back from it in this one. But we also then think that Jamie has died, and Claire marries Lord John Grey. That happens as a cliffhanger in this book, is that Claire is married to Lord John Grey, doesn't know if her husband lived or died. And yeah, so anyway, it's going to be intense. I'm interested to see how much ground they'll cover, but if I had to stake a guess, I think it ends with them on the way to Scotland, because you know how, it's been a while, but they used to do, like, every half season, they would kind of change up, how stuff looked. I really think that they'll do that in the second half, and we'll get to be, like, fully Scottish for a little while, right? And yeah, and then we'll get to see where Buck and Roger end up. Like, I think we'll do maybe a little of season 8 will be happening in that one, because Roger and Buck go to some crazy places, and we get to see some crazy people that we haven't seen in many, many seasons. So this is why I was freaking out a bit last night, because I was like, wow, they're actually going to go to Scotland. Like Claire and Jamie are going to go, and we're going to see, the 1777 Scotland, and, older Ian, and we know that Jenny is supposed to be recast, but whoever they cast as Jenny, and we'll see Leary, and, like, we'll see all that. But then Roger and Buck also end up in Scotland in a different time, and there are characters from our past that we get to see again, which I'm just so excited for that. It's going to be nuts. So anyway, all right, I need to wrap this up. This one has went much longer than some of the others. Thank you so much for joining me. Of course, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you thought of the rating. Where do you think they're going to end off this mid-season finale? It is said we're not getting the second half until next year, so hopefully it is early in the year, and they're not, I think it will depend on, like, how long, like, the strike lasts, because maybe they'll want to push that off a little bit to, I don't know. I mean, I hope the strikes end, just because I want people to get better negotiated contracts at this point, so we'll see. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. I will see you next week for the finale. Bye.